Welcome to our One Book, One Community event. This book is possible because of a Libraries Transforming Communities grant. We were with the grant also able to purchase our outdoor book drop, which has been getting quite a bit of use, so we're thankful for that. I'm really thankful to have an excellent panel here today. And we'll start with just introducing the panelists' names, and then we'll start with our discussion with the panelists first. So we have Ben Barrett over here, Diane Whitcraft, Joe Schmidt, Don Posh, Jeff Fox, and John Bodzislaw. So we're going to get started with some questions.
Dan, life's an adventure. Every day is a gift. Every person you meet and every heart you touch is for a reason. If you don't believe it, you will. I came into this. I woke up in a room thinking I left the TV on. I was working in a paper mill doing instrumentation and process control work. And I thought I'd left the TV on, and I thought ER or something was on the TV. Because I heard one doctor after another explain what they had done to me. And there were 19 of them that reported out that day. And when I opened my eyes, they were on about 15. When this gentleman that was my age now, I'm 67 this year, he goes, "Well, Mr. Barrett, welcome back. I'd like you to meet your doctors." And that's how I came out of the coma I was in. I got rolled in 1993 and they threw me on the train tracks. I got run over by 2 locomotives and 4 cars. My neck was broke. My right arm was almost tore off at the shoulder. My left arm was amputated and broke up here. It's all titanium. My lower back had the pedicles broke off in 5 vertebrae, and I lost 1 inch in C6 and 1 inch or a ½ inch in C6 and a ½ inch in L3 in my lower back. I shrunk 1 inch that day. After the pedicles were broke off in my bottom 5 vertebrae, my spinal cord was bruised. My hip was broken, my right leg came out my right knee. Both my lungs were collapsed, and I'm not supposed to be here. And that's a fact. Now, the kid that did my face did a really nice job because I could look a whole lot different. My wrinkles are scars. So, but set me on a different road. 10 years of surgery, and then we started advocating. Jeff was doing it first. He's the one that got me started into the hornet's nest. Although it was rather interesting because the first picture I saw of him doing something was him being arrested in San Francisco with about 500 other disabled people, and they were angry at a nursing home that was spending money that was specifically earmarked for home and community-based services, and they were adding on to the nursing home. So ADAPT went out and had a talk with them.
They were adding on to a nursing home that was already a, what was it, a 4,000 bed nursing home?
Yes,
And they were gonna add on another 1,200 beds.
and they had people with disabilities and 30 bed wards with 1 counter for your belongings.
3
One
drawers.
and 3 drawers.
For 30 people.
And that's the way that's what they were doing with people out there. Well, when they went out there, that ended up turning into what the United States Supreme Court called the Laguna Honda decision. And they ordered them to redirect money. Now, look back at Wisconsin. Anybody dealing with family care or Iris? Those were dreams. They were our dreams in the 90s. There was no such thing. Iris, self-directed cares, money follows person federally. We did that. You know, people that go see the dentist here. The dental clinics here. You don't know that Dave Obey gave a congressional earmark for Lake Superior Community Health and the Marshfield Clinic system to get into dental health care for people on Medicaid. When I got hurt, my first trip to the dentist that I'd been seeing when I had insurance, I went in and they called and scheduled an appointment and thinking I still had insurance. Well, I went in with a Medicaid card. They got rude and they told me to leave. And I owed them $45. Cash. It was interesting. It was dynamic. Things happen for a reason. When we saw that Dave Obey was going to have dinner with the Douglas County Democrats, we're meeting crashers. So we crashed that meeting and Dave knew us because we'd been in DC in his office repeatedly. So he sat down with us and we let him know that back then, if you were a Medicaid recipient and you needed to go to the dentist, you had to lie and tell them you didn't have insurance. Because if you gave them a Medicaid card, they wouldn't service you. They'd tell you to go elsewhere. And when we told him you gotta commit fraud to see the dentist, he was like, how's that? And at that time, when he looked, it was Highway 29 north. Now, you live in Milwaukee today, guess where you're going to the dentist? Ladysmith, Marshfield Clinic. They see residents from all 72 counties in the state. But we showed up and ruled the day for Dave that day, and that was one of the last congressional earmarks that they did. Back then, I don't know if they restarted doing them, but back then, you know, that equipment to set up dental clinics isn't cheap. So we're talking several $100,000. But what happens if you show up? We say in ADAPT, you're either at the table or you're on the menu.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Is there anybody else who'd like to share their story?
I'll go next.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna move the mic a little closer to
You're
that.
a little soft voice.
My name is Diane Whitcraft. I live just north of Webster. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1979. I was 28 years old with 2 little girls. And I did fine. You know, you always have to transition to something. There wasn't any medication for MS back then, but in 1993, the first medication came out. And the purpose of it was not to cure it, and there still is no cure, but the purpose of it was to limit the amount of exacerbations or attacks that an individual would have every year. And it really worked. But as most of you might know, when you get your insurance and when you get your prescriptions, you have no idea what you cost. So I found out later that in 1993, that medication was $10,000 a year. I was a school teacher. I went out on disability in 2008. And then I found out it was $33,000 a year. When I turned 65 and all of a sudden had to look for a new insurance, which was very difficult because medications are on tiers, and every medicine for MS is tier 5, and not all insurance plans covered tier 5 insurances. So your options were limited right away. That's when I found out back, that was 7 years ago, that the medication was then $86,500. My husband and I talked about it, and we realized that in order for me to stay on it, it was going to cost us out of pocket $10,000 a year. And that was the day that I said, stop. I've had enough. This is not right. And that was the day that I became an advocate for the MS Society and for people who have to pay way too much money for prescription drugs to live their best lives. It's not right. Nobody asked for anything to happen to them. Nobody asks for diseases, but it's not right. Now, thankfully, the VA can negotiate. So if I were a veteran, I would be paying, when I was 65, I'm 72 now, it would have been $33,000 a year. But Medicare cannot negotiate. And we pay more for prescription drugs than any country in the world. And everything moves too slowly. The good news about my MS is that it taught me the importance of my voice. It taught me the importance to stand up for myself. It taught me the importance to, that even though I do not like this disease one single bit, that all of a sudden I realized I had a new purpose. I had a new purpose. And so I became a district activist leader. I'm in District 7 in Wisconsin. So my job is to connect with federal officials, in Tiffany's office, Senator Baldwin and Senator Johnson's office, and to build a relationship and to provide information for them so that hopefully they will lower that cost of prescription. Now, granted, everything moves far too slowly in my mind, but we still keep trying. We still keep trying. So that's what I've learned. I've learned the need, and I appreciate that. I've learned a lot from it. I might not like it, but I've learned an awful lot, and I've met a lot of wonderful people along the way. So I'm grateful that I'm able to live the best life that I can live. Because everywhere you look, someone's got something, you know, all of us do. And all of us, I think, have a responsibility to be our best. So that's what I keep trying to do.
Thank you. Move the mic. Do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Joe Schmidt. I'm the Washington County Veteran Service Officer. I primarily deal with the veterans and their spouses, and their children as well. You may not look at, it right now, but I actually have a disability too. And some of the disabilities that you see, you don't see their face value. Some are internal, some you have some behavioral health things, some people have internal things like I'm diagnosed with migraines. And you wouldn't know that just by looking at me too. Those are the things that we struggle with. And you see that you will have a lot of people in the community that will be struggling with that and you don't even know it. So there's a lot of invisible things that I think you kind of overlook sometimes. Which is very, very important to not forget about those things with the veterans themselves. And I gotta I'll kind of focus on there because we have all these actions, so I'll just kind of stay with the lead. The government made a promise, the American people made a promise to our veterans to take care of them. Yeah. My job is to make sure that they make good on that too, and that's from in-service stuff and after the service across the board to make sure that it's good. I know that there's a lot of other questions here, so I don't want to kind of get into the other questions because I want to address a lot of these things kind of piecemeal too. But my main thing is too is that we have a lot of veterans out there and they don't even know that they have access to all this help and like benefits. And, really move it out to them to make sure that they do have that access. Make that impact on the set.
I am Don Posh. I'm with Indigo. I'm an independent living specialist. I cover 4 counties: Burnett, Washburn, Sawyer, and Price. And because of my disability, that's why I work here. Once again, invisible disability. You never know it. I mean, severe pain a lot of times. I was a woodworker, and I used to try to work around it. And it caught up to me to where I couldn't do it anymore. I was always physically fit, played a lot of sports and everything, and I started doing I was a contractor. I built cabinets and furniture. And I would start adding like 6 to 8 weeks to every job I would bid, because if something would happen, it could take that long before I recovered enough to go back to work. And finally, I just couldn't do it anymore. I spent a lot of time laying on ice staring at the ceiling. And then I have some hearing difficulties as well. Can't see that I have a ringing ear, and that right now I'm in a fair amount of pain. And then you take medications, which affect things differently too. And living rurally, it's difficult to know where to go. So if I don't have a degree in something, any job that paid as well as I was making before wasn't accessible. All the jobs that are available were physical. So if I were to go try to work at a quick trip and don't quite make it because the pain doesn't let me, then the town starts talking about maybe they know my wife and say, well, he couldn't even make it a quick trip. And then the words go around the neighborhood and everybody knows that stuff. And I just got lucky. I met Ben and Jeff, and they kind of said, hey, this job is coming up for this, and we think you'd be okay at it. So why don't you apply? Because you don't need a degree to get this job. And you're a good advocate. I've done some advocating. I like to poke the big guy in the eye. That's something that I really love to do, because that's what changes the world. That's what changes our laws. And we need more people to do that. We need more people to get on that phone and off the phone on social media, but on the phone to their Congress people, to the people that can make a difference. When we have things that we see that are happening in our community or in our lives that touch us, we complain to each other about it, but we're not complaining to the people that can change it. So this gives me an opportunity to speak for people that maybe don't have voices, because I really enjoy advocating on their behalf when I have the opportunity.
Name's John Fox. My story starts way back in 77. I was 19 years old. I was riding my bike down the sidewalk, and a car T-boned me to the second lane of traffic. The car came to a skidding stop. I look up and I see the bumper and tire right there, and I go, wow, I'm so close to being pretty spot on the side. But I was okay. So I got up, went home. Beautiful March day, so any 19-year-old would do. I jumped back on my bike and I went for another ride. It's, it was a beautiful day out. And another girl pulling out of the restaurant this time. It's the same thing. He bones me, sends me a second lane of traffic. Car bumper, and I'm going, oh my gosh, it's like deja vu. That's way before the movie theater. But there I was, this time I had a little damages to my bike, I was an unemployed carpenter at the time. Spring of the year was just gonna open up, so I was looking forward to that, Now I had 2 people that had just hit me, I thought, wow, I might get $50 out of this deal, So I jumped back on my bike again and I'm riding and I'm in Wausau and I'm down the hill with traffic and there's a sign there on the sidewalk and it says bicycles must use sidewalk. And I go, I know, come on, I need a little help on this one. I already been hit twice today on the sidewalk, so I'm going eating, meeting, mining, meaning, off. I went down the sidewalk and all of a sudden an old girlfriend of mine was turning down the alley to work and I T-boned in front of her car, did a head plant on the hood of her car with my head and made the bike landed about 10 feet on the other side of it. And my back wasn't broke, but it was pretty well tweaked off to the side. So, of course, back in '77, that was before ADA was there, so. One of my main things in my therapy after I finally back up in a manual chair was learning how to jump curbs with a wheelchair. They could never figure out why my wheelchair has only lasted me about 2 years. Well, you know, every day is slamming them into a curb, you know, because you want to go somewhere. That's why, you know, we're so lucky, you know, some of the laws that we have now, you know, ADAs are not just for women with strollers. Good.
Well, I'm John Bodzislaw, and Andy's husband there too. I'm a Army veteran. Spent some time there, actually, a long time back. I've been diagnosed with PTSD and depression. So, again, it's independent disability. I also have something called long QT syndrome, which is a genetic heart disease. Can cause sudden death. I also have ADHD. And Joel was saying there's a, you know, when I save most of my stuff for communities that would have transferred.
Thank you all for sharing your stories, for being vulnerable. Appreciate that. Our next question moves on to the topic of accessibility. Have you experienced barriers to accessibility in your community? Do we want to start going this way? Do you want to pass? Just take that. Want to try that?
Yeah.
Yeah. The cord's not that long.
Okay.
Disability, well, being in a wheelchair, let's see, almost anytime there's more than 4 inches, I'm not going there because you can't. You know, they're kind of building all these beautiful trails around everywhere. Well, they put them in class 5 road gravel. Well, that's like throwing ball bearings out. You know, you can't go nowhere because you're just spinning your tires. Go to an old restaurant somewhere. Yeah, no accessibility anywhere. So yeah, plenty of disability places up there not to be going anywhere.
I'd say employment again, it's just more difficult here, less for transportation. I think transportation is a big issue with most people. The cost of trying to keep a car running and the cost of a car that is not really good to start with is out of a lot of people's reach. And I think transportation is really a huge barrier. They're doing, our organization does have a transportation program. The ADRC has a transportation program, but still there's people falling through the cracks.
Yeah, Don had mine too. So yeah, transportation is a huge obstacle for a lot of our veterans and their spouses too, trying to get to their medical appointments. You know, a lot of times it comes down to funding. We do have a grant from the state that does subsidize that. We do get veterans down to the VA hospital, but then the local visits, that seems to be the problem, the disconnect. So if they don't have a family member or a friend that can get them to an appointment, we have to work around and try to find different ways to help them. I know we work with ADRC, and they'll pay the same rate we do to down to Minneapolis. And our grant will just pay the difference for that, but they have to show that genuine need for it too, but we definitely don't want our veterans not going to their appointments. When it comes down to accessibility and, you know, Jeff hit the nail on the head too. It's like the trails, there's some awesome, beautiful things in our county that, you know, I wish that our people with disabilities could see, but yeah, they have that limitation about not being able to go down and see those things. So, try to work better on trying to get them that accessibility.
I think of something besides transportation. I think one of the hardest things for me are doors. You know, I'll tell you a little story. I facilitate a support group for people with MS at the Webster Library. And one of the people in my group usually has a chair, and several of us have walkers, and the door isn't automatic. And so I asked, so that was just hard, right? And doors are heavy, and I understand why, because it's a fire thing. But it's hard nonetheless. But the good news is that, you know, people can be really kind. And I went to the librarian at Webster at the time and said, Patty, is there anything that we can do? And she felt so bad because it wasn't in the budget. But what I learned is the ADA, a lot of things are dependent on population. And so they weren't doing anything illegal by not having an automatic door. But there was a button covered up by a sign that allowed you, you know, to press the button and someone would come, but you never saw that button. And so I asked her if she could please go to the library board, and bless her soul, she did. And within a week, the button was there with a great big sign saying, if you need assistance in opening this door, please press this button. So that's the bad news and that's the good news.
Any innovations? Quick trips, gas stations. Like the number on the gas pumps? We did that. Serious. We did that. DNR today, our Wisconsin DNR no longer puts class 5 aggregate on their trails at their state parks. They put plastic gravel. We did that. There are things you can do when you see that things aren't right. Accessibility in gas stations. How many people have seen the ice machine sitting on the sidewalk after the curb cut? When Link Stop up in Minong became handicap accessible, it was the Wisconsin Lottery Commission that made them move the ice machines. We did that. There are things you can do. Sometimes you got to take time to get to know your elected representatives and stuff so they can call the lottery commission on the locals. But people don't realize that a lot of times, a lot of people with disabilities buy lottery tickets. And that would have embroiled the state in an ADA lawsuit. So we didn't have to do anything, and we didn't have to be the bad guys. The lottery commission was a bad guy. So it's kind of cool how you can go around things. Instead of trying to lock horns with them, you try to get around the side.
So we're gonna go to the fourth question, because you all can answer the third question. There's a statement, I believe it's in the book. It says, disability is a natural part of the human condition. Do you agree with this statement?
Ed Roberts said, the father of the independent living movement, the first independent living center in the United States from Berkeley, California, said, disability, some of us get it young and some of us get it old, but we all get it before we die.
When I was doing my homework, when Angie sent these questions, I thought long and hard about that. And I truly think that all of us have a disability in some way or another, and it might be visible or not visible, but I just believe that we all do. And then it's our responsibility to do something positive to change it or to make it better.
Yeah, so I agree that nobody's born perfect and we kind of go through life and we find out what we're good and we're not good at, and there's limitations, but you know, sometimes those limitations drive us to be better and do better things, and we kind of work around and we work together to get things done, just to get around some of those things that we're not so good at.
They already said what I think.
What that was on the disabilities and aging, the one that I hate the most are these right here, because now without these, I can't see anything. Whereas before I used to have 20/20 vision, but I went to the doctor and I said, well, she goes, can you do that LASIK surgery on me, you know, so I can read glasses? And he said, well, you know, Chuck, there's really nothing I can do for you. You have old eye. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you have old eye. Apparently after we get so old, our eyes just don't want to focus anymore. So there you go. Everybody sooner or later, we will all be disabled. And unfortunately, people with disabilities, we're at least 25% of us say we are disabled. There's another 25% that don't admit to being disabled. But if we could all get together on voting, we'd be the biggest group around to vote anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely 100% agree with that statement. I was once told by somebody that, you know, PTSD is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. You know, the brain does things to protect itself in very traumatic situations. And then with my heart condition, LMPP syndrome, that's a completely genetic thing that I was born on. Didn't find out about it while I was born, but this is, human beings are so complex, and there's, you know, there's so many ways that we can be different, and a lot of things that we label as a disability is just a difference of us between other people that makes, you know, it's a good one's my ADHD. My brain just doesn't work the same as other people. You know, autism is kind of related to, they're considered that neurodivergent, different. My brains just work different, and that's just how you live. You know? Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you face that others may not be aware of?
Well, quite a few for me, actually, because most of my stuff, like if you saw me on the street, you won't know anything was wrong. You know, like you just don't see that. Because of my PTSD, I had horrible sleep. I had a really hard time sleeping at night. It's because I was a scout in the military, and most of the stuff that we did was at night. You know, we used that as cover and stuff. So for some reason, it's just my brain adapted during that time to stay awake and operate. And that affects everything. My sleep schedule is different, so I'm most of the time that I'm awake is spent alone by myself because everyone else is. And then with like the ADHD, that was growing up was very difficult in school and stuff. I'm a very, very intelligent person, but I never could be good in school because I couldn't get myself to focus on my own. I was learning and I just, it's, people don't understand that. It's like, well, why don't you just, the brain just can't, So yeah, it's, you get put. It's just everyday living with a lot of this stuff. It just, there's a change.
My scariest, I think, would be, when it's not flat in the winter time, it's icy. Because I'm at the mercy of whatever way it is downhill.
I think there's a statement that people that don't really understand make, if I were them, I would. You're not them. You don't know. You have no idea what people have gone through. You don't know that he's had PTSD. You don't know that people have diabetes. You don't know. You don't see it. So that judgmental thing that occurs so often, that puts hurtful to a lot of people. And that's what I think is something that could be changed, and that's going to take a lot of work to get people to stop talking about each other in a negative way.
Yeah, Don kind of stole in on that, but I agree. Very good. I guess adding on to that too, so that, when I have migraines too, and I'm working and I'm dealing with people too, and you try to fight through it too, and it does affect your concentration pieces of it as well. And but you try to do your best, and I think some people said you don't understand what's going on, and it's hard to articulate that to people sometimes about the things you go through, because you look normal. You go to your job, you do your job, and then they don't really, they can't tell that you're having one until it's like real bad, and you lay down, but they don't really see what's going on in the internal piece of it as well too. So it's very hard to. So then you make those those thought decisions on, it's like, well, maybe it's something else besides that. Maybe it's just doesn't want to do his job, or he's just trying to cut corners and things of that nature too. And a lot of times sometimes you get these things, you just need to break contact with that meeting and kind of let that headache go away, so you can go back and be good at what you do again. So it happens. That's what I do personally, go through. So.
I think that I could give you a list of things that are hard for me. But I don't want to do that. I read an article not that long ago that said, everyone can be nice. It's easy to say hello, good morning, and walk on by. But it takes something a whole lot more to be kind. Kindness takes an action. Today, when I drove up into the handicap spot, and I struggle, I know I do, with getting this darn walker out of the back seat. I have another name for it, but I won't say that. And two people in this community said, "Can I help you?" And I denied their help, because sometimes I just need to do it myself. I need to know that I can still make these legs work, and I can still be independent enough to drive. I drive a lot better than I walk. But when I read that article, it really made sense to me that maybe we all just need to be a little kinder and not just say hello, but say, "Can I help you?"
or open the door. I'm always so glad when there's somebody right in front of me or right in back of me to hold that door open.
Kindness gets kindness, love gets love. When we first met Justin Dart Jr., he was father of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The first 3 words he'd say were, "I love you." He didn't know any of us. And he was grandson of Charles Walgreen. So it's not like he was a man with needs. But back in America's history, he had some bad things happen to him with his disability being post-polio. And he ended up institutionalized, and he was a man with needs, and he had to fire a doctor and hire a different doctor to get out. And that sent him on a tear, and back in the 80s, he ran around the United States and took up stories from people that were warehoused, who lost their homes and lost all their belongings and stuff because they needed a little assistance to get up or go down at night. And it's by far cheaper to help somebody get out of bed in the morning and let them go about their day and help them go to bed at night than it is to put them in a nursing home and lock them away. So, you know.
What are some accomplishments or goals that you're proud of?
Being currently appointed and being appointed to, I had about 8 appointments from Governor Walker. I've been appointed to the different state councils, the Council on Physical Disabilities, since about 2005 under Jim Doyle. And every governor since, including this one. What we do know is very few people from this neck of the woods actually bother to step up and go down and advocate. So Jeff and I are known down there because we've been troublemakers. But it's, we're old, we're getting old. And it's nerve-wracking wondering who's gonna fill our shoes when we're done. So.
Really short story. The greatest gift one of my little girls gave me. Courtney was 7, and at that time I was in my 30s and I was using a cane. And they were talking about handicapped people in school. You don't hear that word very often anymore. And I said to her, well, do you know any handicapped people, Courtney? She said, Mom, I can't think of one single one. So I think that's probably my greatest accomplishment. But I am really proud. 6 years ago, I started a support group for people with MS. And so if any of you know of anyone, I just happened to bring a flyer that you can pass on. We meet once a month. We are small, but we are strong. We are a lovely group of people with all kinds of varying levels of disability. But we are good to one another, and it's good to not feel alone. And the other thing is something that was already said, but that using your voice. 1 year, I got to go to Washington, D.C. With the MS Society, and I got to meet Senator Baldwin and tell her my story of stopping medication because it was inaccessible and unaffordable. And she invited me to a press conference. She invited me to DC for the State of the Union. And I say that only because it just reminds us all that if you're willing to be vulnerable and if you're willing to speak up, then I think good things can happen. And the other thing is along the way in this journey, I've just met such wonderful people.
Yeah, say besides being a father of three wonderful children, I think, the thing I'm most proud of is being the advocate for the county, for our veterans and being their voice and working so hard for them, because there are so many bureaucratic barriers that are in the way for them, and it's very, very difficult to get their access for that too. And it's very fulfilling to see lives change when you can actually get them their access and things they need to turn those lives around. You know, they're just getting the information that they need to make those decisions in their lives. You know, it is truly life changing for a lot of these veterans.
I think one thing I really enjoy is educating. I do monthly articles that go out to 4 counties and just trying to let people feel that disability experience, how it's affecting them as people are aging, what it's like to change as you're aging. And I've been a DJ on community radio. This is my 22nd year, so I took that experience and started an independent living show that we do once a month, and I get comments on it, so I must be reaching people, and I really enjoy doing that. And one really cool thing for advocacy, I'm also a caregiver. My father lives with me, he's 89 years old, and I took him to North Lakes Clinic, and I was wearing my caregiver hat, and he's incontinent, so he has to go to the bathroom as soon as we get there. And the door thing came up. The door was real heavy, and I didn't recognize that because I'm thinking about the visit, and I had to go in the bathroom with him, which is very uncomfortable. I didn't enjoy doing that. I'm sure he didn't as well. But there's no way he's gonna get in there with the walker and get out. So I had to stay in there with him. And after we sat down, I thought about it. Man, I shouldn't have had to do that. That isn't right. So the next morning, I sent an email to North Lakes Clinic and told them what happened. Went back to check on it about 3 to 4 weeks later, and they said, yeah, do you need me to come in? Because we have a device that measures the pressure on the door, and you could sometimes adjust the pressure so that it opens a lot easier. They said, no, you don't have to come up. We already did it, put a button on there, door opens. So that was my little adventure in advocacy. 4 weeks later, North Lakes Clinic, I was floored how quick they did that. So sometimes you just gotta ask. If there's a business that you'd like to get into, maybe you can offer to, talk to the owner and say, hey, I'd like to come in here, and I know other people would, but we're having difficulty with that stair. So is there any way that we could find a way to get you to do something about that so that you would increase your business? Maybe there's a tax break, maybe there's grants available. Hook us up with the Independent Living Center. Maybe they will advocate for that and help you find out if there's any grants. So sometimes asking just gets that dialogue rolling, and maybe you'll find out that people aren't afraid to make those changes. Maybe they've never been asked before.
I do like them, Ben, and on the Council on Physical Disabilities, for about the last 25 years. But I'd say one of my best accomplishments that I can think of was starting a new program with WIDA, to where they would rehab homes and smaller business, smaller places instead of big conglomerate places that they put all over the place, so that they would remodel the bathroom and the kitchen at a low interest rate and make it accessible for people so that they could live all over the community instead of just like the, wherever they decide to push in.
No, this. Hey, after that, I don't have as much experience with helping, let's say, the community and all.
Give yourself time.
It is unbelievable. I guess, you know, the thing I'm most proud of is giving back my community, you know. Volunteer coach, middle school football, and shall take. Coach, a neighbor of mine gets her house. That's. This stuff I'm most proud of.
Have you ever had a positive experience with accessibility that you'd like to share?
To accessibility. Right, no, I can never think of any time when I've had a problem getting in where it's really been solved. So accessibility, if it's not there. The best one about accessibility is, here you go. My doctor asked me when COVID first started, 19, well, Jeff, how are you doing now that you really can't get out and visit anybody? And I looked at the doctor and I said, Doctor, when could I go out and visit anybody before? Everybody had stairs at their house.
I think I already did mine, so. You're up.
I think with the VA's got a couple programs, for the veterans, we can put accessibility ramps up for them. Especially when they start getting into some mobility issues. They also have grants that will give them accessibility to like showers, modifications of the house, put handholds up. Just so they can be safe at home, especially if they're fall risks. Just major safety things that they can put in so that they can stay at their homes and then try to enjoy their life as best they possibly can. I think those are the big wins that we usually get with our vets. Because it is a life changer for them too, because there's a contemplation, do I want to go to assisted living, do I want to go to a nursing home? And the ability to stay at home is so huge for their mental health. It is so big for them.
I can think of a couple of things. I'm glad I have a scooter like you do that lets me get around and go places where I wouldn't otherwise be able to go. I'm glad that I can take that scooter every once in a while on an airplane. I can go all the way down to where you get on the plane. The negative thing is that, of course, you don't drink a thing before you get on that airplane because you're not sure how you're going to get to the bathroom. But the good news is that there is an act that is in Congress right now.
Yep.
And in 2025, I believe, all new aircraft are going to have accessible bathrooms and wider aisles so that people in chairs can move more easily, and they can have as much coffee as they want to drink before they get on the plane.
I would just add and seating,
Yes,
so.
Yeah.
Front
seating.
Yeah, front seating. And positive things with accessibility, lots. Get to see places. The one positive that's kind of a negative is when you go to most of these public and political events, they bring you into the handicapped entrance in the back. This is usually somewhere where it's not, it is accessible, but not really. Now, the dynamic is they also bring the people that are there to see the crowd in that same handicap entrance. So you get to meet people like Jeff and I did, like Howard Dean behind the scenes, and Wesley Clark, and those folks, because when you show up at events, they bring them in the back door and you're there. I've been to the nation's capital 20 times plus, 30 times most likely. It's one of the more inaccessible cities in the country. So when we show up and do national stuff, we go right down the road. We don't use the sidewalks. So when we do national actions, there's usually between 150 and 500 people in wheelchairs. And they'll line up and go down the road. And snake traffic for several hours. It's a little inconvenience, but most of the people there end up spending most of their days waiting for something. So it's just have them wait just a few minutes out of your day and experience what everybody else does daily. You know. But-
Ben, tell them about the tower. That's it.
Oh, Eagle Tower. Up on the Door County Peninsula, the state of Wisconsin rebuilt an overlooking tower. There's a ramp going up like 90 feet in the air. So it's ramped, you can take a wheelchair, you can go up there like everybody else, it's made accessible. It's scenic overlook on the Door County Peninsula, and it's actually quite pretty because the ramp goes up through the tops of the trees. So it was quite a construction project. They came to us and asked for questions, and if they were going to do it, how would they do it and stuff, and we gave them input. The reason being, they found out that somebody in Florida was building a tower and they weren't ramping it, and the federal government stopped it. So.
The program today is called One Book, One Community.
Yep.
It's all about community, building community, and talking about the communities that we belong in. Can you tell us a little bit about what communities you belong in, and if there's any communities that you feel like you do not belong in?
The gap community. Lots of communities I feel like I belong in. I've lived here since 1980, close to 50 years. Getting there. That's about 6 years away, so. My family's been here since 1902, off and on. We have old blood. My great grandfather homesteaded up north of Minong, out in the woods there, sand country. So, this community, my courthouse, our courthouse, has my uncle's name on the plaque. He was the county board chairperson when they started discussing building the new courthouse. So those were dynamic days back then. I learned a lot from Eugene. But I also learned a lot from my dad, the scoutmaster. So, you know. I discovered that there's a lot of people with really big hearts. And there are times when you really have to have assistance, and there are people here that will go out of their way to do things that others wouldn't. Like helping you when you broke down on the side of the road. So it's good. I'd rather be here than in Milwaukee, for sure.
I had
A little bit of trouble with this question. It made me really think about my community. And sometimes I think when you have a disability, you're kind of used to it. And so maybe something that might be a problem for someone else isn't for you just because you're used to it. But the communities that I am in, that I really appreciate, and maybe, like I said, maybe I'm answering this wrong, but am a I'm a hospice volunteer. And I really appreciate being able to go in and visit with someone. And there's elevators and I can get there, so I don't go into homes. I just go into assisted living places. So that's an ability that I have. I'm in a community up here called 100 Women Who Care. And it's a community that enables us to provide money to nonprofits in need. And I really appreciate belonging to that community. A community that I wish I could belong to is one that traveled. I had great joy when I turned 70 and my husband and I went to Zion National Park, and there were accessible trails. And I had never haven't felt that joy in a long, long time. So I appreciated that. And I guess I wish there was more of that, or maybe I need to find more of that for myself.
So obviously I belong to the veterans community, but I just keep my answer short to any community I would not feel what I belong to would be a community that would exclude somebody. I think that's pretty much obvious to you. I would never want to be a part of a community that would exclude.
I enjoy being part of Washburn County. When I go into a business and somebody serves me, I'm kind of old fashioned. I say please and thank you. I hold doors open for people, and sometimes they actually do for me, so maybe it's catching on. We do have a lot of nice people here. Some people, well, you gotta put up with them, but if you bring a good attitude, if you come somewhere and you let down your prejudices, maybe there's some people from another country working in the restaurant and you already not like them because they don't look like you? Or would you hold out your hand and say, hi, how are you? Where are you from? Be open, build community, challenge people that don't want to. If somebody says, well, we don't like those people because they're like that. How do you know they're like that if you never met them in the first place? If you were unwilling to shake their hand and say hi. So I think we live in a great place. I mentioned I cover 4 counties. There is more going on in Washburn County than the other 3. I'm not going to mention the other 3, but this county, we've got some really great people doing some great work, and there are things going on here that are not offered in those other counties because people. So I'm proud to be part of that.
Luckily, I've always had transportation, so I like the fact that you can just kind of hike up here and with nowhere, with no people around, because the big cities are just way too busy. But I guess my ideal city would be where I would love to live, where everybody would treat everybody the way they would want to be treated themselves.
For me, I belong to the veteran community. Pretty obvious. But for the second half of this question, my experience is, I joined the military right up in school. As an Iraq, 20 years old. And I can't relate to people. It's the whole experience was just different, like they're talking about the parties they were having, their frat or something, and, and while I was, being blown up and watching them. Friends and influence, not being able to see them. Well, yeah, it's just hard. Yeah.
Is there a question on here that anybody would really like to answer? There's a couple. Okay, so if you look through and pick your question, and I'll start with John.
So it's number 12 here. Staying alive is a lot of work for a disabled person to make it. It's like, it's gotten to this point now, I was in Iraq and almost 40 now. We lost six men when we were in Iraq, and since then we've lost 8. Drinking themselves to death, or just not being able to, just not being able to handle that trauma. So at times, it's quite literally, people, because of society and the expectations of that and whatever, they don't want to be here. It's sad and heartbreaking. To see.
Ben was talking earlier about the march that we did from Philadelphia down to the White House. And when we were in Philadelphia, it was in the early morning and I was on the sidewalk. And I didn't have a clock, and this is way back before people had cell phones and that kind of stuff. And I was just asking people what time it was, and nobody would give me what time of day it was. And it was the first time I noticed that all these people were just looking straight in front of them and not anywhere else. So that I literally felt like I was invisible, not even there.
Oh, tick number 9. What are some historic events centered around disability? Something you might be familiar with, the Olmsted Inn. And that was a challenge to come out of the nursing home by two women that decided that they had enough. They wanted to live on their own and they thought they could. So they took it to court and they won. And that's where family care, IRIS, home health care, all that came because 2 women made a challenge that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And that made a big difference in our lives, or it may make a difference in your life somewhere down the road, or maybe a family member or a friend. So that I think is really important. I think disability history all along, if you do have a disability, I think it's good to look into it and see how we got to where we are, because it empowers you to think that, hey, this one person was able to change how we look at disability. If you look at Ed Roberts and a 14-year-old that decided that he wasn't going to live in an iron lung with his polio, to go ahead and say, well, not only am I not going to starve myself to death, because he did try to commit suicide, he tried to starve himself to death down to like 70 pounds when he was 14 years old. And the next day he just changed his attitude. He said, no, I'm going to live. And he changed. One man, one guy, one kid that said, no, I'm going to graduate. And he had to get a special waiver because he didn't have the physical education credits to graduate high school. Then he went on and he said, well, I'm going to go to college. And there were no colleges that accepted people with his condition. He had to take his iron lung to the infirmary, which was called, we would now call maybe like a medical center inside the Berkeley campus. And he used that to sleep at night. During the day, he attended classes and he did graduate. And then he went on to start the first independent living center in 1972 at Berkeley. And I worked for an independent living center, so I'm really proud of the work he did. If you look to see what one person can do, it's simply amazing. It just takes some conviction.
That was an excellent story. Like Diane was saying about the strength of your voice is huge, and I just want to answer the question about how do I see myself as an advocate? The voice, 100%. An advocate is a person that can be that voice for the people that can't use their voice or can't articulate what they want or need. One of the things I try to do every day is try to improve people's life or to help them achieve to be the very best person that they possibly can be. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of being an advocate for somebody.
Question. That's all, no. I think aside from using your voice, it's having a positive attitude. I have done the MS walk in the Twin Cities for 35 years. And for the last 17 years, I had a team. And that team of people have raised over $150,000 in 17 years. And I like to think it's because I was vulnerable. Not that I ever was a crybaby or a whiner, but that I always tried to be positive with them when I was asking them for help. Because as much as I believe the government who works for us needs to put their, they need to be a part of the game. I think that we do too. In fact, I just wrote a letter. I wrote an email to Senators Baldwin Johnson and my representative Tiffany with a picture of our team and told them, yes, we ask for money, but I want you to know that we do the work too. We do the work too. And I think that's really important for people to see that we're not just holding out our hand, that we've got a piece of the game as well.
Don talked about Ed Roberts and the first independent living center in America. I'll talk about the second. And the Reverend Wade Blank, Presbyterian minister that ended up being an activities director at a nursing home called Heritage House in Denver, Colorado. There were 19 people. They were all children. None of them were of age. They all lived in one wing as one unit. The second independent living center in America came to life out of a need for attendance services. Society's assets in Wisconsin was the same, the need for attendance services. But the Reverend Wade Blank taught us that it's number one, not our job to complain. It's our job to offer solutions to the problems we're facing. Because if you complain and you don't have any way to fix it, it's never going to get corrected. It's our job to figure out what we need and then advocate for what we need so that we have it. And it's so important, that and telling the truth. Never exaggerating. And then
And does any other panelists have something else they'd like to answer?
So the last question on here, sorry how individuals feel both invisible and hyper visible at the same time. Experiencing. I experience this every November 11th. Veterans Day, and back in 2004, my unit was sent to fight in Fallujah, which ended up being the bloodiest battle in Iraq War. So I sit there and watch, thinking thinking of veterans and all that for their service, and then at the same time, no one can tell you what, no one can tell you what food is. It's just that it's a strange thing. He celebrated it, and then at the same time, no one was like something that's really needed. I think it's like that.
Is there anybody else who'd like to talk about any other questions?
Oh.
Okay, Don?
Says, what are some current events centered around disability we're at? That's cool, for starters. We at Indigo are having, an ADA, which is the Americans with Disability Act celebration for the 34th anniversary at UW Superior. Coming up on July 23rd, starts at 11 o'clock. So if you're in the Superior Duluth area, stop in and grab something to eat, come and see what we got going on there. There's a lot of things that, if you have things going on with your disability, it's always good to contact locally the ADRC. We work really well with the ADRC, and or contact us and see if we could find out ways to help you get through with whatever's happening with your disability, because we all work well together to solve problems. So always keep that in mind.
I was born and raised in Minnesota, but have been coming up here for nearly 60 years. And I think that maybe Wisconsinites don't realize the importance of the ADRC. Not every state has one. And they are there for not just people with disabilities, but they're there for everyone. And they serve so many people that I think Wisconsin should feel really proud of itself. And I think that, Angie, I really commend you for getting a grant to make disability visible in a community, because I've never been a part of anything like this before, and I commend you for giving us that opportunity. Thank you.
ADRCs. Wisconsin waiver. We did it. It was a waiver again to step out of federal rules, to start them up. They started here, and the states they're in now they're wonderful, but we need them nationwide. The one thing I would add, we've been doing for the last several years, we've been running all over the state, trying to do trainings with housing providers and with other people with disabilities about emergency planning and preparedness for weather. Here we can plan and we have food for snowstorms and stuff, but there are people that shop day to day. And when years ago, when Hurricane Katrina happened, at the time of Katrina, we knew a lady we'd met at Adapt in DC, and she was part of this coffee clutch of ladies that sat at a table out in the courtyard all night and drank coffee and smoked cigarettes. And Benilda Cacheda was from New Orleans. And when that hurricane came, she was at home the next day because she'd been told, just wait, someone will come. She drowned. We put together a planning manual for people with disabilities so that they put together, if plan A is to rely on public emergency officials, then you need plan B, C, D, and E. Call Uncle Bob, Uncle John, if something bad is coming, if there's a fire coming, get out. You know, take your life into your own hands, and we've been doing trainings around the state for that, because it's so important. That, and where do you meet if your house is wiped out by a tornado? Or today, everybody's here, how many people have vets that last more than a day or two? You know, people don't think about that, but it's important that we as individuals do our own personal planning so that when things do go south, we have something to fall back on.
I appreciate every single one of you, for your vulnerability, for sharing your stories. Appreciate it very much.